Welcome, Midnight, Creed-like, and subscribe. Chapter 1. The Notebook That Wouldn't Change. It was one of those New York afternoons when the rain makes the buildings look older than they are, and the taxis look tired. The street outside Wolfe's brownstone on West 35th had gone dark and slick, and the air carried a damp chill that slipped in under the door as if it belonged. Wolfe was in his office, installed behind his desk like a monument to certainty. He had already spent the better part of the day being annoyed at small things, which for him counted as peace. Fritz had served coffee with almond cakes that were too elegant to be eaten without ceremony, and Wolfe had regarded them with the solemn attention of a man inspecting evidence. Then he had returned to his orchids in spirit, if not in fact, since even from the office you could feel the pull of the plant rooms upstairs, where Wolfe's real loyalties lived. I was at my desk, pretending to be useful when the doorbell rang. Fritz, who could make any sound in the house seem polite, went to answer it. He came back and announced, "A gentleman who says he is Dr. Halford." Wolfe did not look up. "If he is a doctor, Mr. Goodwin, he can wait. If he is not a doctor, he can wait longer." "His shoes are already wet," I said. "That means he is serious or careless. Either kind can pay." Wolfe made a sound that suggested my logic was a personal insult. I went out to the front room. Dr. Halford was tall and neat, a man whose collar looked as if it had been educated. His coat was dark. His hat was dry in the way a hat gets when it has been protected at the cost of the wearer's shoulders, and his expression carried that professional calm that is supposed to be comforting and often is not. He held a small black notebook in his right hand. It was pocket-size, with a cover that had been handled often enough to lose its shine. The thing looked simple, but he held it the way a man holds something that can damage him if he drops it. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, offering his hand, "thank you for seeing me." "Wolfe sees people," I told him. "I route them. Come in, before the rain decides to follow you." That got a mild smile, restrained and practiced. I led him into the office. Wolfe's eyes rose, narrowed, and appraised Halford with chilly economy. "Doctor, sit. Speak briefly." Halford sat in the red leather chair facing Wolfe's desk. The notebook stayed on his knee, both hands braced over it. "I am a psychiatrist," he began. "I am aware that my profession is often associated with nonsense. I assure you I am not here for entertainment." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Then you are already making progress." Halford ignored the jab. He had the kind of self-control that comes from training or from fear of losing it in public. "I treat a patient named Mara Trent," he said. "She is anxious, cooperative, intelligent. She came to me after a period of insomnia, nightmares, and panic. We initiated sleep therapy. Clinically, it succeeded. Her functioning improved. She reports fewer acute symptoms." "And yet," Wolfe said, "you appear." Halford's fingers tightened on the notebook, then relaxed as if he had caught himself showing strain. "As part of treatment, I instructed her to keep a dream journal. It is common. It helps externalize and gives material for interpretation." She complied with unusual diligence. He lifted the notebook slightly. "This is the journal." Wolfe's eyes fixed on it with visible distaste, as if Halford had offered him an empty sardine tin. "What is unusual?" Halford drew a breath. "Every entry is the same dream, word for word, night after night. My eyebrows went up before I could stop them. A man can repeat a lie. A man can repeat a story. But a dream, written down 31 times with no change, no drift, no slip, is not a dream. It is an artifact." Wolfe held out his hand. Halford hesitated a fraction, then surrendered the notebook with the caution of a man passing a loaded object. Wolfe did not open it at once. He examined the cover, the binding, the thickness. He turned it over, checked the back, the edges, the corners. Then he opened it carefully and read a line. His eyes changed, just slightly, which in Wolfe is like thunder in the distance. He slid the notebook across the desk to me. "Read." That surprised me. Wolfe typically wanted his own private first taste. If he put it in my hands, he wanted my voice on it. and he wanted to watch Halford while the words fell into the room. I opened to the page Wolfe had marked with his finger. The handwriting was the first clue. Neat, compact, disciplined. The letters were uniform, the spacing uniform, the pressure uniform. Even the crossing of the T's looked consistent, neither impatient nor flamboyant. It was careful in the way. A frightened person can be careful, as if neatness might keep the world from bursting in. I read aloud, "I am in a room without windows. The walls are painted the color of milk. The floor is bare wood. I can hear rain, but there is no place for it to land. A man is standing with his back to me. He is wearing a dark coat that reaches his knees. He says, 'You will remember it.'" "Exactly." I try to speak, but my mouth is full of paper. Halford's face did not move. Wolfe watched the page, but I could tell he was listening to rhythm and choice, the way he listened to a witness. "There is a table with a notebook on it," I continued. "The notebook is black. I open it and see writing I have not written. It says, April 17th, 9:20, West 43rd Street, 214, initials RM. That made my throat tighten, and not from the damp. Dreams do not usually give you street numbers and initials unless someone is trying to turn sleep into a telegram. Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine. "Continue." The man says, "Do not change a word." I look down and see my hands. The fingers are ink-stained. The nails are clean. I am ashamed, and I do not know why. Outside, the rain tapped at the windows with steady insistence. In Wolfe's office, the air felt a shade colder. "I hear a sound in the hall," I read. "A soft scrape, like something being dragged carefully so it will not make a noise. The man in the coat says, 'This is where you wake.'" I wake. I stopped, not because there was no more, but because the shape of it had settled. The last lines described waking with a taste of soap in her mouth and a sense of cold at the back of her neck, the kind of detail a novelist adds to make you believe. It was good writing. Too good. Too deliberate. Wolfe held out his hand. I returned. "The notebook," Halford said. "That entry is dated last night. It is identical to the entry dated the night before. And the night before that, 31 times. Wolfe flipped pages with his thumb. His lips pursed. "The handwriting is consistent." "Yes," Halford said, "that is part of it. She writes it with no variation, no fatigue, no drift, no mistake." Wolfe's gaze went back to the lines. "Doctor, how do you know she writes it at night? Perhaps she copied it 31 times on one afternoon to please you." Halford's mouth tightened. "I considered that. She brings it in weekly. The ink and impression differ in ways consistent with different pens and different sessions. Also, she is not theatrical. She is compliant to a fault. She would not play a game without a reason." Wolfe grunted. "People do nothing without a reason. Often, the reason is foolish." I leaned forward. "What did she say when you asked her about the repetition?" Halford's eyes flicked to me. "She says she wakes, writes it down because she is told to, and then goes back to sleep. She says she does not know why it does not change. She says it frightens her." "Does she remember the dream when she wakes?" I asked. "She says yes," Halford replied. "Perfectly. She says it is the only thing in her life that feels fixed." Wolfe's fingers tapped the notebook once. "Does she have any connection? To West 43rd Street? To that number? To the initials RM?" Halford shook his head. "Not that she can identify. She works as an administrative assistant at a small publishing firm. She lives alone, no criminal record, no known associations with that address. I checked, in my limited way. The address exists. It is an old building, mixed occupancy." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "So the dream contains a true address, a true date and time. Perhaps also true initials." Halford's calm slipped just enough to show strain. "Mr. Wolfe, I am not here because I believe in prophecy. I am here because the precision and repetition suggest influence, suggest design." Wolfe's chin lifted. "I dislike design that pretends to be accident." He opened the notebook again and studied a page with the intensity he usually reserved for menus. The handwriting is controlled. The pressure is the same at the beginning and end of the lines. There is no evidence of fatigue, yet she reports fear. The fear is concealed under neatness. I said, "That sounds like half the people in Manhattan." Wolfe ignored me. "Doctor, tell me precisely why you brought this to me instead of to the police." Halford's gaze dropped to the notebook and returned. "Because nothing has happened, not yet. Because if I go to the police with a patient's dream, I will be dismissed. And because if something is intended, I want to understand it before it becomes harm." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "You suppose harm." "I suspect it," Halford said. "The dream contains a command. Do not change a word. You will remember it exactly. It is coercive. It is not a random image. It feels like a planted refrain." Wolfe's eyes shifted slightly, as if the phrase had clicked into place. "A planted refrain," he repeated. He looked at me. "Do you perceive it, Mr. Goodwin?" "I perceive that I do not like it," I said. "And I perceive that if someone is using a woman's sleep as a delivery system, he ought to be slapped with something heavy." Wolfe's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it did not arrive. "A heavy book would be appropriate. Dr. Halford, bring me the patient." Halford blinked. "To your home?" "To my office," Wolfe corrected, offended by the implication. "Tomorrow at 11. I do not see clients after 11:30. I require my schedule. Also, I will not conduct an inquiry through intermediaries when the intermediary is a notebook." Halford hesitated. "She is fragile." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Then she should not be used." That landed in the room with a weight that made even the rain seem quieter. I said, "Doctor, before you go, give us everything you have. Full name, address, phone number, where she works, family, friends, enemies, the last time someone looked at her wrong in an elevator. If you are worried about her confidentiality, you should be more worried about whatever is trying to turn her dreams into a schedule." Halford looked at Wolfe. Wolfe nodded once, impatiently, as if such details were obvious, and I was wasting time by speaking them. Halford reached into his coat and produced a folded sheet of paper. He placed it on Wolfe's desk. "Her information. And mine." Wolfe did not touch it. He rarely touched anything until he had decided whether it deserved his fingers. "You will also provide tomorrow any notes you have on her therapy." Halford's jaw tightened. "Those are sensitive." Wolfe's eyes were flat. "So is this." Halford rose. Fritz appeared as if he had been listening through the woodwork, which he probably had, and escorted Halford out with quiet competence when might. The front door closed. Wolfe looked at the notebook again as if it had developed a smell. I said, "Planted refrain. I don't like that phrase. It makes me think of a song you cannot stop humming." Wolfe's gaze moved to me. "Precisely. Do we have a case?" I asked. "Or do we have a psychiatrist with a hobby?" Wolfe tapped the notebook once with a thick finger. "A dream is private, Mr. Goodwin. When it becomes public in this manner, when it carries a street number and initials and repeats with mechanical fidelity, it ceases to be a dream. It becomes a device." "A device for what?" I said. "Blackmail? Threat? A practical joke with a graduate degree?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "If I knew, I would not be irritated." He leaned back, and the chair creaked in quiet protest. "We will begin with the specifics. April 17th, 9:20, West 43rd Street, 214 RM. We will discover what occurred or is intended to occur at that place and time. We will also discover who benefits from frightening a compliant woman into copying a script." I glanced at the rain-streaked window. April 17th is more than a month away. Wolfe's lips pressed together. "Then we have time. That is both fortunate and ominous." I stood, already feeling the familiar tug of work. "I will start with the address and the initials." Wolfe's eyes shifted toward the staircase as if he could see through it to the orchid rooms above. "And I will begin with the notebook." "You plan to interrogate it," I said. "I plan to understand it," Wolfe replied. "Interrogation implies it may answer. It will not. People answer. Objects accuse." I picked up my hat. Then, let's go find the people before the object gets its wish. As I opened the door to step out into the wet New York afternoon, I had the uneasy feeling that I was walking into a story someone else had written in advance, and that the worst part was not the writing. The worst part was the insistence that it could not be changed. Chapter 2. Mara Trent's carefully broken voice. New York has a talent for making the day feel undecided. There are mornings when the sun comes up like a promise, and there are mornings when it arrives like a reluctant witness, squinting at the oath and wishing it were somewhere else. This was the second kind. The rain had quit in the night, but it left the streets lacquered and the air heavy with damp and exhaust. It was not cold enough to be honest about it, and not warm enough to be kind. The sky was a pale grey lid, and the buildings looked as if they were waiting for someone to explain themselves. Wolfe had told Dr. Halford to bring Mara Trent to the house at 11. Wolfe also had told me, without saying it outright, to make certain she arrived alive, coherent, and not accompanied by anything that would try to run the show. Wolfe has a way of giving you an order by stating a preference and letting your self-preservation do the rest. So I went out early because I did not like the sound of planted refrain, and I liked even less the idea of someone using a woman's sleep as a mailbox. Mara Trent had agreed, through Halford, to meet me first at a place where she could sit with a cup of coffee and pretend she was an ordinary New Yorker with a schedule and a future. Halford suggested a quiet shop near her office. I suggested somewhere public enough to keep anyone from being clever. We settled on a diner on 9th Avenue that had clean tables, sour waitresses, and a window that looked out on passing humanity like a moral lesson. When I arrived, she was already there. That told me something. People who are late are careless or defiant. People who are early are afraid. She sat in a booth by the window, hands folded on the table, a paper cup of coffee in front of her that looked untouched. She was in her late 20s or early 30s, slim, with brown hair pulled back too tightly, as if she had decided her own scalp should not be allowed an opinion. Her coat was sensible, her shoes plain, and her posture was the kind you get from spending too much time trying not to be noticed. Her face was not pretty in the magazine way. It was better than that, if you had time. Her mouth had a softness that suggested warmth, and her eyes had an intelligence that would have been lively if it had not been held down like a dog on a short leash. When I slid into the booth, she smiled, politely, the way a person smiles when she is borrowing her own body and hopes the owner will not return mid-conversation. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Archie," I told her. "If you call me Mr. Goodwin in a diner, people will assume you are either suing me or marrying me." Her smile widened a fraction. It was the first change I saw in her, and it was small enough to make me notice it. "You came," I said. "Thank you." "I said I would," she replied. Her voice was careful too, each word placed gently, as if she was afraid of breaking something inside it. "Dr. Halford says you have been doing very well," I said. Her eyes flicked away and back. "He says that. It sounds nicer than what I feel." "What do you feel?" I asked. She took a breath. "Like I am not as frightened as I was, but I am not more free. It is like someone turned down the volume and left the song playing." That phrase landed hard. Wolfe would have liked it. Wolfe likes any metaphor that behaves. I nodded. "He also says you have been keeping a dream journal." Her fingers tightened on each other. "Yes, and that it is always the same dream." Her eyes held mine for a moment, and then, as if the stare had cost her something, she looked down at the table. "Yes, I let a waitress bring me coffee because conversations go better when you have a prop." When she left, I leaned in slightly. "Mara, I am going to ask you about it. Not because I enjoy discomfort, but because the dream contains particulars that do not belong there. A date, a time, an address, initials." She flinched at initials. It was not dramatic, not theatrical. It was quick and involuntary, like a finger pulling back from heat. I noted it and kept my tone light. That one stung, did it? Her mouth tightened. I do not know why it does that. I do not know why any of it does. Start with the clinic, I said. She blinked. The clinic? Dr. Halford says sleep therapy, I replied. That can mean a lot of things, from sensible routines to machinery. You mentioned a clinic to him. Tell me about it. She hesitated. Then her voice took on a faintly rehearsed smoothness. It is called Somnicare Institute. She said it, as if she had seen it printed on a sign 1,000 times and had been instructed to make it sound trustworthy. Somnicare, I repeated. That sounds like a place where sleep wears a uniform. Her lips twitched. The twitched died before. It became a smile. It was recommended, she said. There were brochures. They were very clean. Clean, I said. That is a fine word for a place that deals in dreams. They were sleek, she added, as if correcting herself. White and silver. They showed smiling people in beds that looked like hotel beds. They had phrases about wellness and restoration. They used the word reframing a lot. The way she said reframing had that same thin sheen, like an advertisement repeated until it became true. It also made her eyes flicker, not with flinch this time, but with a kind of blankness, as if her mind had stepped into fog for a second. You went there, I prompted. Yes, she said, and that polite control returned. They were strict about sessions. They were punctual. They had forms. They had rules about phones. They said it was to protect the process. What process? I asked. She swallowed. That is the strange part. I cannot recall the session. Content. I held my cup still, watching her face. You cannot recall what happened in the sessions. I remember arriving, she said. I remember the lobby. It smelled like something like clean linen. I remember signing in. I remember a woman at the desk with perfect teeth. I remember being led down a hall, but after that I have gaps. Not blackouts, I said. Gaps. Yes, she whispered. Not like fainting, not like losing time. It is more like a page has been removed from a book, but the binding is still there. And what do you remember? I asked. She stared at the coffee cup as if it might speak for her. Feelings, warmth, fog, obedience. That last word came out lower, as if she did not want it heard. I kept my voice gentle. Obedience to whom? She shook her head quickly. I do not know. That is the worst part. I do not remember being forced. I remember agreeing. I remember wanting to be good at it. Good at sleeping, I said. Good at whatever they wanted, she corrected, and her eyes lifted to mine with a flash of fear that was real enough to make my stomach tighten. All right, I said. Who was your contact there? She frowned, slightly, as if reaching for a name behind glass. A coordinator. Her name was Lila, I think. Lila Sennett. It came out with a question mark. That told me memory was not the only thing being managed. And the clinician? I asked. Mara's fingers pressed together until the knuckles paled. I do not know. They said I would not need to focus on individuals. They said the system mattered, more than the person, that it would help me not attach. Not attach, I repeated. That is a charming idea for a place selling comfort. She looked away. They said it kindly. People say many things kindly, I told her. Kindness is cheap. She took a breath and forced herself back into control. It helped. At first it helped. I slept. I woke up and felt calm. I felt cleaned out. And then you started writing the same dream every night, I said. Yes. Did it begin right away? I asked. No, she said slowly. There was a week where I slept and did not remember anything. Then one night I woke up and the dream was there, clear as a photograph. I wrote it down because Dr. Halford told me to write down what I remembered. The next night it happened again. The next night again. And it never changes. Except the date and time and address, I said. Her eyes widened slightly. Those are always the same too. I let that hang for a moment. Mara, I said. I am going to do something that will probably annoy you. Her voice was small. What? I'm going to test you. She stiffened. Test me like a patient. Test you like a witness, I said. If this is planted, the planting has seams. We want to find them. She looked at the table again, and I saw her shoulders rise with tension, then settle. All right. I took out a small notebook of my own and a pen, because props matter, and because I like to remind people that writing is not magic. It is just ink. Start at the beginning, I said. Recite the dream. Her eyes lifted, not to me, but somewhere past me, and her voice changed. It became steady, rhythmic, almost musical, not emotional, not searching, perfect. I am in a room without windows. The walls are painted the color of milk. The floor is bare wood. I can hear rain, but there is no place for it to land. She went on without pause. Every phrase arrived at the exact moment it should, like a trained actor hitting marks on a stage. She did not hesitate once. She did not correct herself. She did not breathe in a way that suggested she was remembering. She sounded like she was reading from inside her skull. When she reached the line about the table and the notebook, she spoke the particulars with the same calm precision. April 17th, 9:20, West 43rd Street, 214. Initials RM. At RM, her eyelids fluttered, a tiny tremor, and her voice dipped a shade, then recovered. That was the second seam. The first had been her flinch at the word initials. The second was her involuntary reaction at the initials themselves. Kept my face neutral and made a note. When she finished, she blinked, as if waking, and looked at me. Her polite smile returned, thin and frightened. That is it, she said. You did that very well, I told her. Her mouth tightened. It is not a performance. It sounds like one, I said, and then, to soften it, I added, not because you are acting, because something has trained you. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. I do not want to be trained. I believe you, I said. Now I am going to ask you questions about the lines. She nodded stiff. When you say room without windows, do you see it? I asked. Yes, she said quickly. It is always the same. What color are the walls? I asked. The color of milk, she replied, and then her brow furrowed, as if she had been asked a question outside the script. But I do not know what that means. Milk is white. It is not white. It is pale, flat. Do you smell anything in the room? I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. No, not in the room. But when I wake up, there is soap. Like a clean hospital soap. Good, I said. Now the man in the coat. Have you ever seen his face? She shook her head. Never. He is always turned away. How tall? I asked. She hesitated. Taller than me. Broad. But that could be nothing. What does his voice sound like? I asked. Her fingers tightened again. Normal. Not deep. Not high. Just certain. When he says, you will remember it exactly, does it feel like a threat? I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine. It feels like a rule. A rule made by whom? I asked. Her mouth opened, then she swallowed hard. I do not know. When you say, do not change a word, do you want to change a word? I asked. Her eyes widened, and I saw fear punch through her politeness like a fist through paper. Yes. Which word? I asked softly. She stared at me as if I had asked her to name a sin. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then she whispered, the initials. That settled in my stomach like a stone. All right, I said. You do not have to say them again. She exhaled, and for the first time her shoulders sagged, as if she had been holding them up for days. Somnicare told you to write, I said. No, she said quickly. Dr. Halford told me. And Somnicare told you to obey, I said. She flinched at obey, not as sharply as before, but enough. They told me to trust the process. Same thing, I said. Do you still go there? She shook her head. I stopped 2 weeks ago. I told them I wanted to continue with Dr. Halford only. Did they argue? I asked. Her lips pressed together. They were polite. They said they understood. They said I could come back any time. They sent me a brochure in the mail, as if I might forget where they are. I nodded. Any phone calls? One, she said. A woman asked if I was sleeping well. She said it brightly. I said yes. She said she was glad. Then she said, "Remember, do not change a word." My coffee tasted like nothing. She said that, I repeated. Mara nodded, eyes wide. I thought she meant about my journal, about being honest. And you did not tell Dr. Halford, I said. She looked ashamed. I did not want to sound ridiculous. You are allowed to sound ridiculous when someone is instructing you, I told her. Now you're going to do something else for me. Her voice was faint. What? You are going to come to Wolfe's office at 11, I said. And you are going to tell him exactly what you told me, including the phone call. Wolfe will decide what this is, and then we will decide who has earned the right to be slapped with something heavy. A tiny flicker of relief appeared in her eyes, quickly covered by fear. Is he kind? I smiled. Wolfe is not kind. Wolfe is correct. That is better. In the long run. She nodded, and her hands unclenched slightly. We stood to leave. Outside, the city moved with its usual impatience. People walked fast as if they were late to their own lives. Cars hissed on wet pavement. A delivery man cursed at a door that would not open. Mara stepped onto the sidewalk, and for a moment she looked very small, swallowed by Manhattan. As we walked toward a cab, she said almost inaudibly, "Mr. Goodwin, Archie, do you think something will happen on that date?" "I do not know," I admitted. "But I know this. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make you say it without changing a word. That means it matters to someone. And when something matters to someone, it is either money, fear, or death." Her face went pale. I held the cab door for her and kept my smile in place, because sometimes a smile is a shield you lend someone. Inside my coat pocket, my fingers brushed the little notebook I had used to take notes, and I felt the knot that had formed there, not cloth, not paper, but a hard twist of certainty. A planted refrain is not planted for beauty. It is planted to grow. And I had the feeling that April 17th was waiting, patient as a spider. Chapter 3. Somnicare and the Soft Voice Machine. Somnicare was on the kind of street where even the pigeons look insured. The building had a glass front. That reflected the city back at itself in a flattering way, and the lobby smelled like money laundering its conscience with lavender. I paused just long enough outside to let my eyes adjust to the shine, then went in. The receptionist sat behind, a curved desk that looked like it had been designed by a committee of dentists. Her smile was professional enough to have a payroll number. She had hair that did not move, teeth that did not question their purpose, and a voice tuned to the frequency that makes nervous people feel managed. "Good morning," she said, even, though the day still felt like leftover night. "Welcome to Somnicare Institute. How may we help you?" I gave her my best friendly look, the one that suggests I might tip well and I might sue later. "I'm looking for Dr. Owen Rusk. Her smile did not change. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have a curiosity," I said. "It's worse than an appointment. It keeps coming back." There was a pause that lasted exactly one polite beat too long. Then she reached for a phone with careful fingers. "Your name?" "Archie Goodwin." Her eyes flicked up and down, as if she was scanning a mental list. The smile held. "One moment, please." She made the call, murmured into the receiver, listened, nodded, and looked at me again. "Dr. Rusk will see you. Please follow me." She stood and led me through a hallway that was too quiet. Carpets muffled footsteps, and the walls were a soft, neutral color that pretended to be soothing. There were framed photographs of sleeping faces that looked staged and expensive. There were plants that looked watered on schedule. Somnicare was the kind of place that promised relief and delivered obedience. We reached a door with frosted glass. The receptionist tapped once, opened it, and announced me like a package. Dr. Owen. Rusk stood when I entered. He was about 45, trim, neat, with hair going slightly grey at the temples in a way that suggested he planned it. His hands were calm, the kind of hands you would trust to hold a scalpel or a newborn. His eyes were sharp enough to make the calm feel like a tool. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "please sit." His office was tasteful, which is a word people use when they mean expensive but do not want to sound vulgar. There were books, but not enough to suggest he read them. There was a framed diploma, but it was placed like art. Behind him, a cabinet, with a smoked glass front, sat against the wall. It was locked. The key was not in the lock. The key hung on a chain that ran from Rusk's belt loop to his pocket. It swung slightly when he moved, like a small pendulum counting private time. I sat and smiled. "Doctor, I'm here about a former patient of yours, Mara Trent." His face changed by a fraction, not surprise, not concern, but recognition. He had expected the name at some point, like a bill. "Mara Trent," he repeated. "Yes, I recall her. She participated in our program for several weeks." "She stopped coming," I said. "She did," Rusk agreed, his voice smooth. "That is her choice. We do not compel participation." I nodded, as if I believed in free will. "She has been keeping a dream journal," Rusk's expression held. "That is common." "She has been writing the same dream every night," I said. Word for word. The first real flicker crossed his eyes, so fast it might have been my imagination if I had not been looking for it. He recovered instantly. "Repetition," he said with a faintly approving tone, "can be an aspect of self-soothing. The mind returns to a familiar narrative as a way to stabilize, particularly in anxious individuals." "That sounds scientific," I said. "It also sounds like something you could print in a brochure." His smile was small and controlled. "We do not rely on brochures, Mr. Goodwin. We rely on evidence." "I like evidence," I told him. "That's why I'm here." Rusk folded, his hands on the desk, calm as a man who has practiced being calm in front of desperate people. "Somnicare is an institute devoted to improving sleep and reducing anxiety. We use modern techniques, guided audio, controlled environments, cognitive reframing. We offer structure. Many patients benefit." I leaned back and let him talk. Men, like Rusk, always reveal something when they explain themselves. They cannot help it. The truth leaks through the pride. "Guided audio," I repeated. "Headphones," "Yes," he said. "In some sessions, it helps focus attention." "Controlled environments," I said. "Dim lights, quiet rooms." "Precisely," he replied. "To reduce stimulation." "Suggestion scripts," I said, watching his eyes. Words spoken in a soft voice until the brain agrees. His smile tightened. "We do not use coercive suggestion. We use supportive guidance." "Supportive," I said. "That's a comforting word." "Like gentle." Rusk did not flinch. His calm hands stayed calm. His eyes remained sharp. "You work with psychiatrists," I said. "Referrals." "We coordinate," he replied. "With consent." Mara had said forms, rules about phones. The system mattered more than the person. Not attach. I let those phrases line up in my mind like dominoes. "I'd like to see your facility," I said. Rusk hesitated just long enough to weigh the risk, then stood. "Of course. We have nothing to hide." That sentence is always a lie, whether the speaker knows it or not. He led me down another hallway. The carpets swallowed sound. The air stayed perfumed with lavender and expensive air filtration. Doors opened with quiet clicks. The first room was what they probably called a recovery lounge. Reclining chairs, soft lighting, blankets folded with military precision. A speaker in the ceiling played faint music, not a melody so much as a suggestion of tranquility. "Patients wait here," Rusk said, "before and after sessions." "Do they talk?" I asked. "Sometimes," he said. Often they prefer silence, or they are encouraged to prefer silence, I thought. The next room was a therapy room. Dimmer, smaller. A chair that looked like a dentist's chair that had quit dentistry and gone into psychology. A side table held a set of headphones, thick, padded ones, with a clean coiled cord. Guided sessions, Rusk said. The patient listens. We monitor response. Monitor how? I asked. He gestured toward a panel on the wall, discreet and modern. Heart rate, breathing, basic indicators. We adjust accordingly. There was a clipboard on a shelf with a chart. Rusk moved smoothly in front of it without seeming to, and I could not see the name on top. But I saw columns, session number, duration, notes. Handwriting in neat blocks. May I said, reaching casually. Rusk's hand moved, polite but quick, intercepting mine without touching. Those are private. Of course, I said, smiling. Confidentiality. A sacred thing, unless someone wants to sell it. He ignored that. We moved on. Another room had a couch and a wall screen showing a slow-moving image of ocean waves. It was meant to hypnotize you into calm or into compliance, depending on how much you trusted the operator. A smaller room held shelves of what looked like audio equipment and files. The door was closed. The handle had a keypad. Rusk did not offer to open it. What's in there? I asked. Technical storage, he said easily. Recordings, equipment, nothing of interest. That was my third lie of the morning, and I had not even had lunch. We returned to his office. As he sat behind his desk again, the key on his chain swung once and settled. I appreciate the tour, I said. Now let's talk about Mara Trent. Rusk's calm eyes stayed on mine. As I said, she participated. She benefited. She chose to discontinue. She also cannot recall session content, I said. Only feelings, warmth, fog, obedience. That word landed like a shoe on a polished floor. Rusk's eyelids flickered once. Patients often describe relaxation as warmth, he said, and reduced anxiety can feel like fog to someone accustomed to hypervigilance. As for obedience, that is your word. It was hers, I said. His lips pressed together, then released. Some patients experience a sense of trust and surrender. It is therapeutic. And the dream journal, I said. The same dream, 31 times. Rusk's expression remained composed, but the muscles near his jaw tightened slightly, as if he had to remind his face who was in charge. Repetition can be a self-soothing ritual, he said again, especially for someone with anxiety. Word for word, I said. Some minds cling to structure, he replied. That is not unheard of. It is to Wolfe, I said. He blinked. Mr. Wolfe. Yes, I said. Nero Wolfe. He's interested. That did it. It was tiny, but it was there. Rusk's calm cracked enough for me to see the edges. Not fear, but calculation. Nero Wolfe's name has weight in New York. It does not open doors, but it makes men consider whether the door is worth holding closed. Mr. Wolfe is a private detective, Rusk said carefully. He is, I agreed. He also dislikes gimmicks and patterns that pretend to be accidents. Which is why I'm here. He refuses to visit. He says the orchids do not travel. Rusk gave a thin smile. Then you are his representative. I'm his legs, I said. Sometimes his mouth when he doesn't want to waste his own words. Rusk's fingers tapped once on the desk, slow and controlled. If Mr. Wolfe has questions, he may submit them in writing. I laughed softly. Doctor, you work in the business of suggestion. Do not suggest to me that Wolfe will submit. His eyes sharpened. Somnicare operates legally. That's a lovely word too, I said. Legal. It covers a lot of sins. Rusk leaned back slightly, studying me. What do you want, Mr. Goodwin? I want to know if you are putting scripts in people's heads, I said. Because one of your former patients is reciting a dream like it's a pledge. Rusk's voice stayed smooth. We do not implant dreams. That is absurd. Absurd is a big category in this town, I said. It has subcategories. Kept his gaze steady. We provide guided audio to promote sleep and reduce anxiety. If a patient repeats a dream, it may be her mind's way of coping. And the specifics, I said. The date, time, address, and initials. Those are her mind coping too. Rusk's smile returned, professional and cool. Dreams incorporate fragments from memory, addresses, numbers, letters. It is not unusual. Then you won't mind if I check, I said. His eyes narrowed. Check what? Your intake materials, I said. Your recordings, your scripts, anything with numbers and initials, anything that could accidentally show up in her dream. Rusk's gaze flicked just once toward the locked cabinet behind him. It was almost imperceptible. It was also enough. My materials are proprietary, he said, and Mara is not, I said. She's a person. His calm hands stayed calm, but his voice cooled a degree. I will not allow you to rummage through Somnicare's internal resources based on a patient's dream. Then, I said, I will rummage through other resources, like your staff. Rusk's eyes hardened. If you harass my employees, I will contact my attorney. I have met attorneys, I said. They are not contagious. He stared at me, and for a moment the office felt less like a wellness institute and more like a bank where someone had mentioned robbery. I rose. Doctor, I appreciate your time. I also appreciate your calm. It suits you. Just remember, calm is not the same as clean. He stood as well, polite to the end. Good day, Mr. Goodwin. Not yet, I said, but it's trying. He escorted me out. The receptionist smiled again, the same smile, unchanged, as if she had been trained to repeat it word for word. Outside, the street noise hit me like reality reasserting itself. I walked half a block before I let myself exhale. Wolfe had refused to come, which meant I had to go twice as hard. I had gotten what I expected, a tour, a pitch, and a wall, but I had also gotten two things I liked. First, I had gotten the name Owen Rusk attached to a locked cabinet with a key he kept on his chain like a comfort object. Second, I had gotten the feeling that Wolfe's name had hit him like a measurement he did not want taken. I reached into my pocket, touched my own notebook, and felt the knot in my gut tighten. Somnicare smelled like lavender and money. Underneath, it smelled like control, and control always has a reason. Chapter 4. Death in the Director's Office. That night, the city stopped pretending it was civilized. New York has a day voice and a night voice. The day voice is horns, argument, commerce, and impatience. The night voice is supposed to be a lullaby, softer traffic, a distant radio, a couple laughing too loudly on a corner because they think the darkness makes them private. This night, the lullaby got traded for sirens. I had been back at the brownstone less than an hour. Mara Trent had come at 11 as scheduled, pale and careful, escorted by Dr. Halford, and Wolfe had done what he always did when confronted with fear. He had treated it like a problem with a solution. He listened. He asked short questions. That felt like scalpel cuts, and he watched her eyes more than her mouth. When she recited the dream in that perfect rhythm, Wolfe's face had gone still in the way it does when he is offended by neatness. He had called it manufactured fidelity, and Mara had looked as if she wanted to apologize for her own brain. When they left, Wolfe told me to return to Somnicare in the afternoon, make another pass, and in Wolfe's words, observe more than you speak for once. He also told me to have Saul Panzer look into the address on West 43rd Street and the initials RM, and he told me to tell Halford to keep Mara under his eye and off Somnicare's schedule. Then Wolfe went upstairs to the plant rooms at 4, with Fritz, leaving me in the office with the feeling that we had stepped into a piece of machinery that was already turning. At 9:30 the phone rang. Fritz brought it in and said, "It is Inspector Kramer." Wolfe was back at his desk, reading with the solemn attention he gave to any printed matter that did not contain a sports score. He frowned at Fritz. At this hour, unwelcome. I took the receiver. Archie Goodwin. Kramer's voice came over like a boot on a stair. Goodwin, where are you? At home, I said. The weather is bad, and the company is worse. What's wrong? You got your nose into that sleep place today, Kramer said. That depends who's asking, I replied. The man who's asking is telling you Dr. Owen Rusk is dead, Kramer said, and you're coming down here. I felt my stomach tighten, not with surprise, but with confirmation. Dead how? Looks like a heart attack, Kramer growled. Except it don't look like one when you get close. We got a doctor here who says there's a mark. A mark, I repeated, on the neck, he said. Small, like a pin. I glanced at Wolfe. He had lifted his head, eyes on me. The expression of a man listening to a sound he does not like. Locked room, Kramer added, as if he was annoyed by the facts. Door locked, window latched. Whole place tidy enough to insult grief. Get down here, he hung up. Wolfe said, well, Dr. Owen Rusk is dead, I said. Somna care. Kramer wants us there. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Kramer wants you there. He will tolerate me if he must. You must, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. For what reason? Because this is the first thing that has happened that smells like your kind of logic, I said. And because if you stay home while the man who ran the soft voice machine turns up dead, someone will decide the answer is heart attack and go back to sleep. Wolfe's lips pressed together. He hated leaving the house at night. He hated leaving it in the rain, and he hated being told, even by implication, that he might be wrong. Very well, he said. Get your coat. Summon the car. Fritz looked pained, as if Wolfe had announced he would eat in a cafeteria. He went to make arrangements. 10 minutes later we were in the car, rolling through streets that reflected red and blue light. Sirens moaned in the distance. New York at night can be beautiful if you do not mind the idea that it would eat you if it could. Somnacare was bright as a showroom. Police cars sat out front with their lights flashing, and the sleek glass entrance made the reflections dance, like a nervous confession. A uniformed officer stopped us, then recognized Kramer's impatience in my face and let us through. Inside, the lavender smell had been punched in the mouth by the odor of adrenaline, wet coats, and institutional coffee. The receptionist's desk was no longer a place for reassurance. It had become a barricade. The same receptionist was there, pale now, her professional smile finally dead. Kramer met us in the lobby. He was broad, rumpled, and annoyed at everything, which was his natural state, but tonight his annoyance had a sharp edge. He looked at Wolfe and frowned harder, because the universe had handed him an extra complication. Wolfe, Kramer said. Inspector, Wolfe replied, as if it pained him to recognize a public servant. Kramer jerked his thumb. Come on, we followed him down the quiet hallway I had walked earlier, but now the quiet had weight. Doors stood open. A couple of Somnacare employees huddled together like people who had been told the building was sinking. Kramer led us to Rusk's office. The door was open now, held by a uniform. The room looked exactly as it had in the afternoon, tasteful and controlled, except control was a joke with a corpse in the chair. Dr. Owen Rusk was slumped behind his desk, head tilted slightly to one side, as if he had nodded off mid-sentence. His eyes were closed. His mouth was parted just enough to suggest surprise or a final thought that had not finished forming. One hand rested on the desk, palm down. The other lay in his lap. The desk surface was orderly, no broken glass, no scattered papers, no overturned chair. The room was tidy enough to insult grief. A man from the medical examiner's office stood nearby, watching faces like a bored schoolteacher. He nodded at Kramer, then glanced at Wolfe as if trying to place him. Wolfe did not look at the man. He looked at the room. His eyes went first to the locked cabinet with smoked glass. Its door was closed. Then to the chain that had held the key. The chain was there, looped near Rusk's belt. The key was not. Wolfe's gaze returned to Rusk's neck. May I? The medical man hesitated, then shrugged. Don't touch. Wolfe did not touch. He leaned, peering from a distance with the intensity of a jeweler examining a flaw. I stepped closer too. On the left side of Rusk's neck, just below the jawline, there was a faint puncture mark. It was small, clean, and almost polite. There was no smear of blood, just a tiny dark dot. If you were not looking for it, you would miss it. If you were looking, it shouted. The medical man said, "At first glance, it could be an insect bite, but the edges are too neat. Looks like a needle." Kramer scowled. "So what? He got jabbed and dropped." The man shrugged again. "Could be a fast-acting drug. Could be something else. I'll know more after I get him to the lab," Wolfe said. "A needle implies intent." Kramer snorted. "Everything implies intent to you." "It is a useful habit," Wolfe replied. Kramer turned. "To me. You were here today." "Yes," I said. "Rusk gave me the tour. He lied 3 times and smiled through it." Kramer grunted. "Good. Now tell me how he got dead in a locked room." "Door locked," I said, glancing at the knob. It was the sort that could be locked from inside with a turn. "Window latched." Kramer jerked a thumb toward the window. "We checked. Latch is down. No tampering. No fire escape access without making noise. No sign anybody climbed. No sign of struggle. He's sitting there like he decided to die neatly." Wolfe's eyes were still scanning. "Who found him?" Kramer pointed toward the hall. "Receptionist. She says he didn't come out, didn't answer, so she got the building manager to open the office with a spare key. That's when she screamed. I got a call because the name was on my list from earlier, and because your name was in the air." Wolfe's gaze snapped to Kramer. "My name." Kramer's lips twisted. "Word gets around when you poke at a place. People talk, especially when they're scared." The medical man said, "Time of death looks recent, maybe within the hour. Hard to be exact without tests." I looked at the desk again. On the blotter was a notepad with a pen aligned parallel, 2 aligned, as if Rusk himself had placed it that way out of habit. I said, "What about security?" Kramer's face soured. "Security logs glitched." "Glitched," I repeated. 12 minutes, Kramer said, and the word came out like he wanted to arrest it. Between 8:46 and 8:58, cameras went dark. Door access records show nothing. Then they come back like nothing happened. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "How convenient." "Yeah," Kramer said. "Convenient like a coffin." He led us back into the hall to a small conference room that had become a staging area. A couple of detectives sat with notebooks. Somnocare staff were lined up in chairs like students waiting to be scolded. The receptionist was there, along with a woman with crisp hair and a tight mouth I recognized from Mara's description. Lila Sennett, a man with a technician's posture, thin and restless hands. Another employee, older, with the weary look, of someone who had sold calm for a living and now regretted the inventory. Kramer stood in front of them. "All right, we're going to go through it again. Who was in the building?" Lila Sennett spoke first, voice bright but strained. "We were closing. Dr. Rusk stayed late. He often stayed late. We had 3 patients with evening sessions. The last left at 8:30. "Names," Kramer snapped. "She gave them." The detectives wrote. I noticed her eyes kept flicking to Wolfe, then away, as if his presence bothered her more than the police. Kramer turned to the technician. "You handle security," the man swallowed. "I handle the systems, cameras, access, recording equipment. And the 12-minute glitch," Kramer said. "Explain." The technician's hands fluttered. "It could be a power surge. We had storms earlier. The system is sensitive." I said, "Earlier storms do not erase exactly 12 minutes of footage. And then restore it clean. That's not weather. That's editing." The man's eyes darted to me. "I didn't edit anything," Wolfe's voice cut in, calm and heavy. "What is your name?" The technician hesitated. "Evan Pike." Wolfe nodded once. "Mr. Pike, do you have the authority to access the raw footage?" "Yes," Pike admitted, then added quickly, "but I didn't." Wolfe said, "Authority is not proof, but it is opportunity." Lila Sennett stiffened. "This is outrageous. We are cooperating." Kramer barked a laugh. Cooperating is what people call it when they don't have a choice. Now give me your alibis again. Each of you. They repeated them. Receptionist at the front desk. Lila in her office finishing paperwork. Pike in the technical room. The older employee in the therapy lounge straightening chairs. Each story sounded neat. Too neat. Somnicare seemed to have trained everyone, not just patients, to keep their sentences tidy. Kramer dismissed them one by one to a detective. Then, he turned to me and Wolfe. "You got more," he said, not as a question. Wolfe said, "Yes." Kramer's eyebrows rose. "From where?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "From the center of this affair, a patient named Mara Trent." Kramer scowled. "I heard about her, the dream notebook." Wolfe's gaze hardened. "Bring her here." Kramer started to argue, then stopped, because he had learned grudgingly that when Wolfe says bring, it is often because Wolfe already sees the shape of what will happen. A half-hour later, Mara arrived with Dr. Halford, both of them, looking as if they had been pulled out of their own beds by the idea that sleep is no longer safe. Mara's face went white when she saw the police, the detectives, the bustle. Her politeness tried to appear, failed, and retreated. Halford put a hand near her elbow without touching, a gesture of support he had probably practiced. Kramer said, "Miss Trent, I'm Inspector Kramer. You know Dr. Rusk is dead." Mara's lips parted. She looked at me and the fear in her eyes was raw. "Dead?" "Yes," Kramer said. "Now tell me about that notebook." Mara blinked. "It's in my bag." "Show me," Kramer said. Mara nodded quickly, too quickly, and reached for her handbag. It was a simple shoulder bag with a strap that looked intact. She opened it with shaking fingers and began to rummage. Her brows knit. Her mouth tightened. She dug deeper, faster. "It's not," she whispered. Kramer's voice sharpened. "Not what?" "It's not here," Mara said, and her voice cracked in a way that sounded carefully broken, like glass that had been scored. "My notebook. It's gone." Halford leaned in, alarmed. "Mara, are you sure?" She looked up, eyes wide. "I brought it. I had it when I left my apartment. I had it when we came here." Kramer snatched the bag, looked inside with impatient hands, then handed it back. "It's not there." Mara's breath came fast. "It never left me," I said. "Nobody grabbed your bag. Nobody bumped you. No tug on the strap." She shook her head hard. "No." Wolfe's voice was low and certain. "Someone removed it without your perception." Mara's eyes filled. "That's impossible." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "It is possible, Miss Trent. It is merely difficult. That is the difference between comfort and reality." Kramer said, "How the hell does a notebook vanish from a bag the woman's carrying?" Wolfe looked at him. "By the same mechanism that produces a dream repeated with mechanical precision. Influence, suggestion, directed attention. The notebook is not merely a record, it is a component." Halford's face tightened. "This is exactly what I feared." Kramer's jaw worked. "You telling me somebody hypnotized her and stole her notebook?" "I am telling you," Wolfe said, "that the notebook is now evidence, and someone has decided it must not be available to us." I stared at Mara, and my mind replayed her recitation, the perfect rhythm, the flinch at the initials, the fog that came over her when she spoke Somnicare's phrases. Warmth, fog, obedience. Kramer pointed a finger at me. "Goodwin, you had that notebook in your hands yesterday." "I did," I said. "Did you copy it?" he demanded. "I copied the important parts," I said. "The date, time, address, initials. If you want my handwriting too, I can bill you for it." Wolfe's eyes shifted. "You did well, Mr. Goodwin, for once." Kramer swore under his breath. "All right. We got a dead director with a needle mark and a missing notebook and a security system that takes a 12-minute nap. If this ain't—" "Murder! It's a circus," Wolfe said. "It is murder," Kramer glared. "We don't have cause yet." Wolfe's voice was calm, and that made it more irritating. "You have a puncture on the neck, no signs of struggle, a locked room, and a timed lapse in security." That is not a natural death. It is a constructed event. I do not yet know the method, but the intention is obvious. Kramer opened his mouth, then shut it. He hated Wolfe most when Wolfe was right quickly. Mara's voice was small. What will happen to me? Wolfe looked at her, and something in his expression softened by a millimeter. With Wolfe, that counts as compassion. What will happen, Wolfe said, depends on whether you continue to obey what was planted. You must do the opposite. Mara's eyes widened. I don't know how. Wolfe's gaze sharpened again. Then we will teach you, with reason. Halford put his hand on Mara's shoulder then, and she did not pull away. Kramer said, Wolfe, you got theories, keep them. I got a dead body. I'm locking this place down. Wolfe nodded once. Do so. And find the key to Dr. Rusk's cabinet. It is missing. Kramer blinked, then cursed, then turned and barked at a detective. Check his chain. Check the office. Check everybody's pockets if you have to. The detective moved. Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, the notebook is gone. Dr. Rusk is dead. Therefore, the case is no longer about a dream. It is about a mechanism of control and what it was intended to accomplish. I nodded slowly. And April 17th is still sitting out there like a loaded date. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Yes, and someone has just indicated that we are close enough to matter. As we left Somnicare, the sirens had quieted, but the city still felt tense, like a man holding his breath. I glanced back at the glass front, the lavender lobby, the receptionist's desk that had promised calm. Now it was just a place where a man had died neatly and a notebook had disappeared without a tug on a strap. If Somnicare sold sleep, it had. Just proven it could sell something else too. It could sell silence. Chapter 5. The Missing Pages. That were never torn. Wolfe hates a vacuum. He hates it in physics, he hates it in politics, and he hates it most in an investigation. A missing object is not merely absent, it is a statement. It announces that someone cared enough to remove it, and it leaves behind a shape that the mind keeps tripping over. By the time we got back to the brownstone, the hour was late enough to offend Wolfe's digestion and my optimism. Fritz met us, with the quiet look of a man who disapproves of sirens in principle. He took our coats, and I could see him already planning the restorative measures that would be required to repair Wolfe's schedule. Wolfe did not go upstairs to the orchids. He went straight to the office, sat behind his desk as if anchoring himself, and looked at me. The notebook, he said. That's a good opening line, I replied. It saves time. Wolfe ignored that, because he always ignores anything. That resembles my charm. Miss Trent's bag. Was it opened by force? No, I said. The clasp wasn't strained, the strap wasn't tugged, and she didn't have the kind of expression people get when someone invades their purse. If the notebook left the bag, it did it politely. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Did she notice a hand inside her life? That is the part that bothers me, I said. She insisted it never left her. She was sure in the way frightened people get sure, because uncertainty is worse. But she didn't notice anything. No bump, no jostle, no helpful person leaning. In close. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Then the thief did not steal paper. He stole certainty. I sat at my desk and let my breath out. I'll put that on a greeting card. Wolfe's gaze held steady. You will do nothing of the sort. Mr. Goodwin, certainty is what keeps a person upright. Miss Trent has little enough. Someone removed an object from her possession without her awareness. That is not merely theft. It is instruction. Instruction, I repeated. You mean she was guided to not notice? Wolfe nodded once. Directed attention. Selective awareness. Call it what you will. It is a technique, not a miracle. I rubbed my forehead. Somnicare calls it science and sells it with lavender. Wolfe's eyes hardened. Science does not require secrecy. I leaned back. Kramer said the security logs glitched for 12 minutes. The cameras went blind and came back like nothing happened. That isn't a glitch. That's a nap someone scheduled. Wolfe nodded. And during that interval, Dr. Rusk died. Or during that interval, someone arranged for him to die, I said, and then cleaned the room up so it looked like he'd fallen asleep in the middle of a lecture. Wolfe's lips pressed together. Yes. He sat for a moment, his fingers steepled, his eyes aimed at nothing in particular, which in Wolfe means he is aiming at everything. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and weighty. "Tell me precisely," he said, "who had proximity to Miss Trent tonight?" "Police, staff, Halford, me," I said, "and whoever else was in that building." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Be exact." "All right," I said. "At Somnicare, the receptionist stayed at the desk. Lila Sennett was the coordinator, moving like she owned the corridors. Evan Pike was the tech man, the one who could lose 12 minutes without sweating. There was also an older staffer who looked like he wished he had gone into plumbing instead." Wolfe's eyes flicked. "And the police?" "Uniforms, detectives, Kramer," I said. "But if a cop stole the notebook, he would have done it with a flashlight and a complaint. Mara would have noticed. She noticed everything and nothing at once." Wolfe grunted. "Then the removal likely occurred before she entered the building, or during a moment of engineered distraction." I nodded slowly. There were plenty of distractions. A dead man in a chair, people talking, Kramer barking, Mara shaking. It would have been easy to come close under the pretense of calming her. Wolfe's eyes held mine. "Precisely." I sat forward. "You want a reconstruction?" Wolfe's lips tightened in what passed for approval. "Yes, you will reconstruct. The clinic flow, where a staff member could approach her, touch the bag, open it, remove the notebook, and close it, all while her mind is encouraged to attend elsewhere." "Encouraged," I said. "That's a friendly word for manipulated." Wolfe's voice stayed level. "We deal in accuracy, Mr. Goodwin, not melodrama." I made a face. "Try telling that to a man with a needle mark in his neck." Wolfe's eyes flicked, impatient. "The puncture is important, but the notebook is central. It contains the refrain." "The refrain," I said. "The dream." Wolfe nodded. "The dream text is not mere nonsense. It is a payload." I sat still for a beat, because that was the first time Wolfe had used a word that made the dream feel less like an oddity and more like a package with an address label. Wolfe continued, "It contains a date, a time, a location, and initials. These are not dream images. They are data. They are hidden in a format that discourages scrutiny. A dream appears harmless. It invites dismissal. It is an excellent courier." I said, "So the notebook was never just a journal. It was a delivery envelope that walked itself around town." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes. Miss Trent's compliance makes her ideal. She believes she is participating in therapy. She is in fact transporting information, perhaps to herself, perhaps to others, perhaps as a trigger." "A trigger for—" "What?" I asked. Wolfe's face went still again. "That remains to be seen, but we will not be passive." I stood and began to pace, because if I sat too long, I would start hearing sirens in my imagination. "Let's reconstruct tonight," I said. Mara arrived with Halford, then Kramer. She opened her bag when Kramer asked. The notebook was gone. Wolfe's gaze held. Therefore it was taken before that moment. Or it was taken earlier and she was instructed to believe it was still there, I said. Wolfe nodded. Yes, I stopped pacing. All right, where could it have happened? Wolfe lifted a hand, counting. 1, at her apartment, before she left, by intrusion. 2, in transit, by a pickpocket with skill and proximity. 3, at Somnicare, during the chaos, by a staff member using a practiced pretense. I said, I vote for 3. Because a pickpocket steals money. This thief stole paper that looked worthless. That's not street work. That's institutional. Wolfe's mouth tightened. And thieves who steal certainty usually work in rooms where people learn to doubt themselves. I pointed at him. That's what I meant. Wolfe dismissed my gesture with a slight movement of his fingers. Continue, I went on. Somnicare staff had reasons to approach her, to calm her, to check vitals, to guide her away from... The body. Lila Sennett would have authority. The receptionist would have access, but not mobility. Evan Pike would have access to systems and keys, not necessarily to a frightened woman. The older staffer could offer a blanket and a soft voice. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the names. The key. Rusk's key is missing, I said. The cabinet key. The chain was there, but not the key, Wolfe nodded. A second missing object. Which means, I said, someone took two things, the key and the notebook. Or someone took the key and someone else took the notebook, and they coordinated. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Coordination implies structure. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Somnicare runs on structure. It's their product. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Mr. Goodwin, we must determine what was in that cabinet. Dr. Rusk guarded it literally on his person. He kept the key on a chain. That suggests it contained materials he deemed valuable or dangerous. Scripts, I said, recordings, patient charts, something proprietary, Wolfe nodded. Or something illicit. I thought of Mara's blankness when she said Somnicare phrases, of her perfect recitation, of her flinch at the initials. I want Saul's report, I said. About the address and the initials. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, he will. Bring it when he has it. In the meantime, you will do what you can. Like what, I said. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. We have a text, the dream. We have a missing notebook that carried it. We have a dead director. We have a 12-minute lapse. You will write down the dream as you heard it. Exactly. You will include every detail. Then we will examine it for structure and concealment. I can do that, I said. I can also call Halford and make sure Mara is somewhere safe. Wolfe's eyes held mine. She must not return to Somnicare. She must not be isolated. That's a cheerful sentence, I said. It implies someone wants her alone. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Yes. I went to the desk drawer and pulled out the notes I had made when Mara recited the dream. It was not perfect, but it was close. I began to rewrite it cleanly because Wolfe's mind likes clean inputs. While I wrote, Wolfe watched me with the same severity he would apply to a waiter pouring wine. Do not embellish, he said. Have you ever known me to embellish? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Frequently. Fair, I said, and kept writing. As I wrote the lines, they took on that odd quality they had before, like a lullaby that carried a confession in its melody. A room without windows, milk-colored walls, a man in a dark coat. A command, a black notebook, data hidden in the middle like contraband. April 17th, 9:20. West 43rd Street, 214. Initials RM, a scrape in the hall, a wake command. When I finished, I slid the page to Wolfe. He read it slowly, lips barely moving, eyes sharp. When he reached the address and initials, his gaze paused for a fraction, as if he had hit a knot in the string. This is not random, he said. No, I agreed. It's too tidy. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Tidy is the enemy of truth. I leaned forward. You said the dream is a payload, hidden data. Courier. But why write it down at all? Why not just plant it in her head and leave it there? Wolfe's eyes lifted. Because a written object can be transferred, examined, stolen, replaced. A memory is difficult to steal from the outside. A notebook is easy. Easy, I said. Except it wasn't. Not tonight. It disappeared like smoke. Wolfe's voice was steady. It disappeared because the thief knew the methods to make a person unaware. That suggests professional practice, which points right back to Somnicare, I said. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, and it also suggests motive. If the notebook mattered enough to retrieve, then what it carries matters, either the data itself or the fact that she carries it. I felt the case tighten around us like a net. So we have to figure out what April 17 is, and why someone is using a woman's sleep to transport it. Wolfe's gaze hardened. And why Dr. Rusk had to be killed tonight. I stared at him. You think his death was not an accident of timing? Wolfe looked offended that I had asked. It was not. Dr. Rusk was either a participant who became inconvenient or a custodian who lost control of his own cabinet. And the key is... Gone, I said. So someone wanted what was inside? Wolfe nodded. Yes. The phone rang. Fritz appeared, silent and efficient, and handed it to me. Saul Panzer, Fritz said, and retreated. I took the receiver. Saul. Saul's voice was brisk. Archie, I got some of what you asked. That address, West 43rd, 214. It's a building with mixed use. Offices on lower floors, apartments above. One office listed under a small private medical practice, name of a doctor named Raphael Madsen. I glanced at Wolfe. His eyes sharpened, at the name, as if it had snapped into place. Saul continued, initials match. RM could be him. Also, building permits show recent work on a basement storage area leased to a company called Meridian Records. Not music. Records as in document. Storage. I felt my throat tighten. Meridian Records, I repeated. Any connection to Somnicare? Not direct, Saul said. But one of Somnicare's board members, name of Helena Marlowe, sits on an advisory committee for a health non-profit that shares an address with Meridian Records' registered agent. That was the kind of detail. Saul dug up like a terrier. I said, good, keep going. I want everything on Raphael Madsen, Helena Marlowe, Meridian Records, and the clinic. Also, check if Somnicare had any recent lawsuits or complaints. Already started, Saul said. One more thing. Somnicare's corporate filings show a change last month. Owen Rusk was listed as director, but also there's a note about a new compliance officer. Name of Lila Sennett. I looked at Wolfe. Again. He had gone very still. Thanks, Saul, I said. Call when you have more. I hung up. Wolfe spoke before I could. RM is likely a person, not merely initials. Dr. Raphael Madsen, I said. And there's a board member. Helena Marlowe with ties to a records outfit. And Lila Sennett got elevated to compliance officer last month. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Compliance. A word used when there is something to comply with. I rubbed my jaw. So Rusk dies. The cabinet key vanishes, the notebook vanishes, and the clinic's compliance officer is the same woman who kept moving around tonight like she owned the place. Wolfe nodded once. Yes. I sat down slowly. You were right. The notebook is not the story. It's the courier. Wolfe's gaze held mine, heavy and certain. And the missing pages were never torn, because they were never pages to begin with. They were instructions. The rain had returned softly, tapping the windows again, as if the city had decided to resume its lullaby. But nothing about it felt soothing anymore. Chapter 6. The Dream That Reads Like Directions. The next morning. Wolfe was at his desk early enough to make the house feel insulted. Fritz had not yet finished declaring war on breakfast, and the street outside was still in that grey interval when New York cannot decide if it is morning or leftover night. Wolfe looked as if he had slept poorly, which for him means he had been annoyed in his dreams. His face was set, his eyes sharp, and his hands were steepled as if he were about to lecture a jury. Recite the dream, he said. I wrote it down, I replied, tapping the sheet. I do not want to read it, Wolfe said. I want to hear it. Read it aloud, slower, as if you were chewing truth. I muttered something uncomplimentary under my breath and picked up the page. I began. I am in a room without windows. The walls are painted the color of milk. The floor is bare wood. I can hear rain, but there is no place for it to land. Stop, Wolfe said. I stopped. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. That opening is not decorative, it is a frame. A room without windows is isolation. Walls the color of milk is neutrality. Bare wood is simplicity. It is a stripped stage. One person. One voice. One script. You make it sound like theater, I said. It is, Wolfe replied. Continue. I read on, slower. A man is standing with his back to me. He is wearing a dark coat that reaches his knees. He says, "You will remember it exactly." I try to speak, but my mouth is full of paper. Wolfe's lips tightened. Mouth full of paper. An image of forced repetition, words replacing speech. Continue. There is a table with a notebook. On it, the notebook is black. I open it and see writing I have not written. It says, April 17th, 9:20, West 43rd Street, 214, initials RM. "Stop," Wolfe said again, and this time his hand stayed raised a moment longer. I frowned. "What?" Wolfe leaned forward. "That is not dream material. That is operational information. Date, time, location, identifier." "Initials," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "A code. Continue." The man says, "Do not change a word." I look down and see my hands. The fingers are ink-stained. The nails are clean. I am ashamed, and I do not know why. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Ink-stained fingers. The act of writing is emphasized. Shame is the leash. Continue. I hear a sound in the hall. A soft scrape like something being dragged carefully so. It will not make a noise. The man in the coat says, "This is where you wake." I wake. I lowered the page. That is the version we have. Wolfe stared at the sheet as if it had lied to him. "It is incomplete." I blinked. "No." That's what she recited. That's what I wrote. Wolfe's voice stayed calm, and that made it more irritating. Miss Trent recites a script. She does not improvise. Therefore, if the script contains only that, it is a crude instrument. Yet the theft of the notebook and the murder of Dr. Rusk suggest sophistication. We are missing embedded segments. "You think Mara has more in the dream than she's admitted," I said. "I think," Wolfe replied, "that the dream is longer. She may omit portions without knowing she omits them. Or she may have been trained to provide a shortened recitation. Unless prompted correctly." I sat back, feeling my scalp tighten. "So, how do we prompt correctly?" Wolfe's eyes fixed on me. "We do what I asked you to do yesterday, and you did not do adequately. We examine the structure for gaps, listen to the rhythm. There are places where a trained mind expects additions." "Wolfe," I said, "if you want music criticism, I can bring you a violinist." Wolfe ignored me. He reached for my page, held it up, and read it silently. His lips moved slightly, forming the words without sound. Then he said, "The words 'in the hall' are a hinge. A corridor implies movement, access, approach. The mention of a scrape implies an object moved. A dragged object suggests concealment. The mind that created this wants the listener to associate the corridor with quiet action," I said. "Or it's just a dream about creepy hallways." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A dream does not file details in neat stacks unless someone built the stacks." He tapped the page with a thick finger. "Where is the rest?" I sighed. "Fine. Let's assume there's more. We can call Halford and have Mara come back." Wolfe shook his head slightly. "Not yet. If we summon her prematurely, we allow the enemy to adjust. We must anticipate. The dream is directions. Therefore, its missing pieces likely contain method." "Method for what?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer I would not like. Wolfe's gaze held mine. "A handoff." I sat still. "You think Mara is carrying instructions for a meet and exchange?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "And?" "She never had to understand. She only had to carry it." The phrase made my stomach tighten. Mara, polite and frightened, a courier with no idea what she carried except dread. Wolfe continued, "Consider the pattern of such directions. They rarely include personal names. Names are risky. Instead, they include identifiers, numbers, phrases, a locker number, a stair color, a day, a sequence of knocks, a phrase to be spoken." I stared at him. "You're building an entire dream that we haven't heard." "I am extrapolating," Wolfe said, "from the nature of the crime. Dr. Rusk is dead. The cabinet key is missing. The notebook is missing. The security lapse is timed. These are coordinated acts. Coordination requires instruction. Instruction is best hidden in something people dismiss. A dream. I ran a hand through my hair. So therapy is the printing press. Wolfe's eyes sharpened in approval, faint but present. Yes, a memorized script implanted by suggestion. Somnacare is a factory. It manufactures compliance and calls it wellness. I leaned forward. And you think the murder wasn't the first crime? Wolfe's voice was flat. It is not. It is merely the loudest one. That settled in the room like a weight. Fritz entered quietly with a tray, set coffee and toast, and withdrew, sensing the air had turned serious enough to curdle milk. Wolfe did not touch the toast. He touched the idea. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "we will obtain the full script." "How?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "By reconstructing the mechanism. We will go to the source." "You mean somnacare," I said. Wolfe's lips pressed, together. "Yes. Not physically, intellectually. We will identify what Dr. Rusk kept in his locked cabinet. It was worth killing for, therefore it is central, and we will identify who now holds the key." I thought of Lila Sennett, crisp and mobile, with her bright, strained voice. I thought of Evan Pike, the technician who could make 12 minutes disappear. I thought of Helena Marlowe's name Saul had mentioned, hanging over corporate filings like perfume that covers something sour. I said, "The dream we have includes the address, West 43rd, 214. Saul found a doctor there, Raphael Madsen, R.M. Wolfe." Nodded. "That may be the destination, but it may also be a decoy." "Decoy," I repeated. Wolfe's eyes were steady. "If you were orchestrating a handoff, would you place the true location in plain view, repeated nightly, accessible to any observer?" "No. You would embed true instructions elsewhere and place a plausible address as bait. Or you would ensure that only a trained mind recognizes the difference." I felt a chill. "So, April 17th might be bait too." "Or a deadline," Wolfe said. "A deadline is useful. It creates pressure. It keeps participants aligned." I stared at the page again, and the words looked less like imagery and more like a map drawn in invisible ink. Room without windows, voice of authority, notebook, data, shame, corridor, scrape, wake command. "Wolfe," I said, "if Mara's dream contains more details, how do we pull them out without breaking her?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "We do not break her. She has already been bent. We straighten her." "That's optimistic for a man who hates optimism," I said. Wolfe's eyes flicked. "It is practical." He leaned back. "You will visit Dr. Halford. You will ask him to guide Miss Trent through a controlled recollection. Not hypnosis, not indulgence, a structured recall. He will do it because he is frightened and because he has a conscience." "And if Somnacare trained her not to say certain parts," I said. Wolfe's gaze hardened. "Then Halford will note where she hesitates, where her eyes flinch, where her speech alters. Those are the seams. We will pull on them." I nodded. Slowly. "And meanwhile?" "Meanwhile," Wolfe said, "you will obtain the roster of Somnacare staff present last night, their roles, their access, and their histories. Specifically, you will discover who could alter security logs, who could approach Miss Trent without suspicion, and who would know the value of the notebook." I stood. "So I do what I do best, talk to people and make them uncomfortable." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And listen, for once." I picked up my hat. "Before I go, tell me something. You're sure the dream is directions?" Wolfe's voice was calm, almost bored. "I am sure it is constructed. Construction implies purpose. Purpose implies action. Action implies directions." I hesitated at the door. "Then we better find the rest of the directions before April 17th arrives and someone follows them." Wolfe's eyes held mine, proud and certain. "We will." Outside, the city was waking up, dragging itself into daylight with the stubbornness of a machine. People walked fast, coffee cups in hand, pretending their minds were their own. I stepped into the street and felt the case tighten again, not as a mystery now, but as a timetable. Mara had never needed to understand. She only had to carry it, and someone had already killed to keep the paper out of our hands. Chapter 7. A second patient. A first witness. Finding a former Somnicare client was not hard. Finding one who would talk was harder. People who pay for comfort do not like admitting the comfort came with strings, and people who were frightened into obedience do not usually advertise the fact, even to themselves. Saul gave me a name by mid-morning. Dylan Cross. Male, early 30s. Graphic designer, which meant he was paid to notice details and punished when he noticed the wrong ones. He had filed a complaint with a Consumer Protection Office 6 weeks ago and then withdrawn it 2 days later. That withdrawal told me more than the complaint. I found him in a coffee shop that specialized in quiet, the kind of place where the chairs are hard, so nobody lingers too long, and the music is soft, so nobody has to feel alone with their thoughts. Dylan Cross sat at a corner table with his back to the wall, which is a habit you pick up when you are nervous and want to pretend you are not. He had the look of a man who slept but did not rest. His face was pale, his eyes slightly red, and his hands kept moving, not dramatically, but in small, restless adjustments, as if his body had forgotten how to be still without permission. When I introduced myself, he stared at me for a long moment, measuring whether I was a salesman, a cop, or a problem. "I'm not here to sell you anything," I said. "I'm here because your clinic director is dead." That got his attention. His jaw tightened, and he glanced toward the front door as if he expected Somnicare to walk in and sit down. "Dead?" he said, not quite believing it. "Yes," I replied. "And if you have anything to tell me about what Somnicare really does, now is a good time. Because once the police finish their paperwork, the truth tends to get filed and forgotten." Dylan's mouth twisted. It almost became a laugh, but it stayed bitter. "They're good at that, filing and forgetting." I sat. "You went there for sleep." He nodded once. "Insomnia, panic, the usual city souvenir. I tried meds, I tried meditation, I tried running at night until my legs didn't have energy to be afraid. Nothing worked. And Somnicare helped," I said. His eyes hardened. "They helped me sleep. That part is true." "But," I prompted. "But they taught me something else," he said, voice low. "They taught me not to ask questions when I was awake." I let that sit. The waitress came by, I waved her off, and Dylan's fingers kept adjusting his cup as if the paper was hot. "How?" I asked. Dylan swallowed. "They call it reframing. They call it reinforcement. They call it a program. They show you clean brochures and smiling people and they tell you it's science. But the real thing is a script." "A script," I repeated, and my mind went straight to Mara's perfect recitation. Dylan nodded, eyes flicking. "There's a room with glass, not a mirror, not exactly. You sit in the chair, they put headphones on you, the lights go down, and behind the glass there's someone reading." "Reading what?" I asked. He shook his head, frustration twisting his mouth. "I couldn't see. The glass is tinted, but I could hear the rhythm, smooth, even, like oil, not a person talking to you, but a voice pushing you into a shape." "Who?" I asked. "Male, female?" "Female," Dylan said, and not a receptionist voice. Not bright, senior, calm, like she'd done it 1,000 times and didn't have to think about it. I leaned in. "Name?" He hesitated, then said, "Nina Calder." That one was new. I filed it in my head and kept my face neutral. "Who is Nina Calder?" I asked. "Senior technician," Dylan said. "That's what her badge said when I saw her in the hall once. She was always guiding sessions, always helping. If you looked lost, she appeared." Like she could smell questions. "What did she look like?" I asked. Dylan exhaled. "Blonde, thin, not young, not old, maybe late 30s, eyes like she was always assessing, not cruel, just empty of doubt." I nodded. "And Dr. Rusk, Dylan's Eyes tightened. Rusk was the face, calm hands, sharp eyes. He talked like a man explaining a product he believed in, but the week before he died, I heard him yelling. "That interests me," I said. Dylan leaned back, and for the first time, I saw real anger flash through the jittery restraint. I was leaving after a session. I got turned around. I heard voices in his office, loud enough to leak into the hall. His door was cracked. "Who was with him?" I asked. Dylan's lips pressed together. "Not a patient. That's what I knew right away. Patients don't talk like that. This was business. Money." "Did you see him?" I asked. "I saw a shoulder and a suit," Dylan said. "Big guy, expensive coat. And I heard his voice clear as day. He said something like, 'You promised deliveries.'" Deliveries. That word hit like a bell. "And Rusk?" I asked. He said, "You don't understand what you're asking." And the other guy said, "I understand the invoice." That sounded like a partner collecting a debt, the kind that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. "Name," I said. Dylan hesitated again, then said, "Graham Holt." That one I recognized from Saul's notes. Investor, business manager. The kind of man who would call himself essential and believe it. "What did Holt want?" I asked. Dylan shook his head. "I didn't know. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to leave. But I heard Holt say, 'If you can't keep your people in line, I'll find someone who can.' And then Rusk said, 'This isn't what we agreed.'" I kept my voice steady. "Did you tell anyone?" Dylan gave me a bitter look. "Tell who?" "The receptionist with the plastic smile, the coordinator who talks like a brochure, the tech guy who pretends glitches happen by magic. I tried to complain once. I filed a report." "And withdrew it," I said. His face tightened. "They called me." "Who?" I asked. Dylan's fingers clenched around the cup. "Nina called her. She said she was concerned about my stress. She said it would be better for my recovery if I didn't stir things up. Then she said, 'You've been sleeping well. Let's keep it that way.'" There was a beat. He looked at me, eyes flat. "That wasn't advice," he said. "That was a leash." I nodded slowly. "Somnicare has a side business." Dylan blinked. "How do you know?" "Because nobody invests serious money in a clinic just to sell." "Calm," I said. "What was it?" His jaw worked. "They call them memory reinforcement packages." Wolfe would hate that phrase. I hated it too. "Explain," I said. Dylan's voice dropped. "They pitch it to private clients, rich ones, people who want to stop remembering certain things or start remembering others. They say it's like training your brain. They say it's ethical. They say it's optional. And it costs," I said. Dylan nodded. "A lot. I overheard numbers once. It wasn't therapy money. It was hush money." I felt the case tighten again, the way it had when Saul mentioned Meridian Records and Helena Marlowe. A clinic selling sleep is one thing. A clinic selling altered memory is another. That's not wellness. That's leverage. "Dylan," I said, "why are you telling me this now?" He stared at his hands. "Because Rusk is dead, and because I'm tired of feeling like my own mind is rented." That was as honest as anything I'd heard all week. I stood. "All right, here's what happens. You give me everything you can remember about Nina Calder, her schedule, her habits, anything odd. And you give me everything you know about Graham Holt, where he works, where he drinks, where he hides when he thinks nobody is watching." Dylan's lips twitched. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I said, "but it's necessary." He nodded once, sharper now, like a man who had finally decided to be angry in a useful direction. As I walked out, I felt that familiar sensation of a smile on my face and a knot in my pocket. The smile was for the world. The knot was for me. Somnicare had not just been selling sleep. It had been selling a way to turn people into couriers, witnesses, and liabilities without their consent. And now the first witness had stepped forward, which meant the second could be silenced. Chapter 8. The Trap with No Teeth Until It Closes Wolfe. Does not chase. Wolfe arranges. He makes the world come to him, which is either arrogance or efficiency, depending on whether you are paying for it. The morning after I spoke with Dylan Cross, Wolfe listened to my report without interrupting, which is always a bad sign for someone else. When I finished describing Nina Calder's smooth voice behind glass, Graham Holt's argument with Rusk about money and deliveries, and the phrase memory reinforcement packages, Wolfe's eyes went very still. Somna Care, Wolfe said, is not a clinic. It is a factory. That's what Dylan thinks, I replied. It is what the evidence states, Wolfe said. He leaned back slightly. And factories have schedules. Schedules produce predictable behavior. I waited. When Wolfe begins speaking in short sentences, he is either about to reveal a conclusion or assign me a task I will not enjoy. We will draw them, Wolfe said. Draw who? Asked. The person who stole Miss Trent's notebook, Wolfe replied. The person who benefits from the script, the person most likely to attempt retrieval of what she believes we possess. You mean Nina Calder, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, or someone behind her. But Nina Calder is an excellent candidate. She is described as a senior technician. She guides sessions. She calms anxious clients and discourages questions. She likely has skill in directed attention. She also likely understands the value of the script. Therefore, she will react when she believes it has been compromised. I grinned. That's a lot of likely. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Mr. Goodwin, stop admiring uncertainty. I will make it irrelevant. He lifted a finger. You will seed a rumor. A rumor, I repeated. To who? The pigeons. To Somna Care, Wolfe said. To Graham Holt. To Nina Calder. To any conduit of information that reaches them. You will leak that I have the dream text copied, decoded, and connected to names. I blinked. But we don't. We have enough, Wolfe said, and we have something better than possession. What's better than possession? I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Their belief. It was a neat line, and I hated giving him the satisfaction, so I nodded instead. How do you want the rumor shaped? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Precisely. State that Nero Wolfe has the dream directions and the names. State that the date and location have been identified. State that the mechanism of implantation has been deduced. State that I will deliver the information to Inspector Kramer this evening, and then we wait, I said. Wolfe nodded once. We wait. I did my part. I called a number connected to Somnicare and asked for their business manager, using a tone that implied impatience and money. I got a polite refusal and left a message that I knew would travel. I called a private investigator I knew who sometimes worked for corporate people and let him overhear in the right way that Wolfe had decoded something that could ruin a clinic. I made one additional call to a reporter I did not trust because rumor travels best when it thinks it is being born in public. By noon, the story had legs. By 2, it had a taxi. At 4:30, Fritz told me there was a visitor. She is a lady, he said. She says her name is Miss Calder. I looked at Wolfe. His eyes were calm, but there was a faint brightness in them that always meant a trap was closing. Show her in, Wolfe said. Fritz led Nina Calder into the office. She was exactly as Dylan had described. Blonde hair, cut neat, and severe. Slim, controlled posture. Her face was pleasant in a way that suggested practice rather than nature. Her hands were polite, held close, palms relaxed, as if she had been taught that open hands make people feel safe. Her eyes were the most honest part of her. They were sharp, assessing, and slightly tired, like a person who spends her days steering other minds and resents having to steer her own. She looked at Wolfe, then at me, and smiled with the same professional calm Somnicare used in its hallways. Mr. Wolfe, she said. Mr. Goodwin. Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. Miss Calder, sit. She sat in the red leather chair, back straight, knees together, as if she were presenting herself for inspection. I came, she began, because I believe there is danger of misunderstanding. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Misunderstanding is seldom dangerous to those who tell the truth. Her smile held. Somnicare has suffered a terrible shock. Dr. Rusk's death is tragic. There is already talk, and talk harms patients. You are here to protect patients, I said. Yes, she replied quickly. To protect them and to prevent scandal. People with anxiety and trauma deserve privacy. They deserve healing, not sensational stories. Wolfe watched her without expression. You are concerned about patients. Yet you come to my home, uninvited, to discuss rumor. Her eyes did not flinch. Rumor becomes reality when it reaches the police. I understand Inspector Kramer is involved, Wolfe said. He is. Nina's hands folded neatly. Mr. Wolfe, I am told you have acquired text from a patient's dream journal. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. You are told. Yes, she said, and that you have interpreted it as directions, that you have names, that you intend to give this to the authorities. Wolfe leaned back slightly. It is remarkable how quickly rumor travels, she smiled faintly. Fear travels quickly too. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. What do you want, Miss Calder? I want to stop harm, she said. If you have something that could be misread, I would like to clarify. Somnicare uses approved methods. We do not implant content. We do not coerce. I said, then why did a notebook vanish from Mara Trent's bag without her noticing? Nina's gaze slid to me. I do not know. And why did your security logs lose 12 minutes? I pressed. Nina's smile stayed in place. Technical failures happen. Wolfe lifted a hand slightly, a gesture for restraint. He looked at Nina. Your concern for patients is admirable, but it is not persuasive. You did not come here merely to advocate ethics. You came to learn what I know. Her eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly. I came to keep you from making a mistake. Wolfe nodded once. Very well. Ask your questions. Nina hesitated. It was the first hesitation she'd shown. Her polished calm wavered for a fraction, then returned. It is about the date, she said. The date you believe is connected. Wolfe did not react. And the number, she added carefully. The locker number. The room went very quiet. I felt my pulse jump, because neither Wolfe nor I had spoken about a locker. Not to her, not in the rumor. Wolfe's rumor had been directions and names. Locker number had not been mentioned because, until this moment, we did not have one. Wolfe's eyes did not widen. Wolfe does not give away surprise like that. But the corners of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. It was something colder and more satisfied. Locker number, Wolfe repeated softly. Nina's eyelids fluttered once. It was the tiniest slip, but it was there. She realized too late what she had revealed. I misspoke, she said smoothly. I meant the street number. No, Wolfe said, voice still mild. You meant locker number, and you also asked about the date. You did so before anyone here mentioned such details aloud. Nina's smile became thinner. Mr. Wolfe, patients talk. Staff hear things. Wolfe's gaze held her like a pin through paper. You were not present when Miss Trent recited her dream in my office. Yet you have knowledge of a locker number embedded in that dream. That knowledge is not derived from public rumor. Nina's hands tightened slightly on each other, then relaxed. Her calm was still there, but now it was defensive, like a door, quietly locking. I said, so you're here because you think Wolfe has copied the script, and you need to know what he knows. Nina looked at me, eyes sharp. I am here because people will suffer if this becomes public. Wolfe's voice remained almost gentle. People have already suffered. Dr. Rusk is dead. Her jaw tightened. Dr. Rusk was killed because someone panicked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Someone panicked. Interesting phrasing. Nina drew a careful breath. Mr. Wolfe, you do not understand what you are touching. There are agreements, private clients, contracts. If you interfere, you could cause damage beyond one clinic. Wolfe's mouth tightened again, and this time the expression was unmistakably pleased, like a man watching a fish volunteer for the hook. Agreements, Wolfe said. Private clients, contracts. You are very helpful, Miss Calder. Nina's eyes hardened. You are not taking me seriously. I am, Wolfe replied. So seriously that I am grateful you came without being summoned. Nina's gaze flicked toward the door, and for the first time she looked as if she had become aware of the chair beneath her. Traps have no teeth until they close, and then the teeth become the only thing you notice. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. You will remain. Inspector Kramer will arrive shortly. Nina's composure cracked enough to show anger. You cannot detain me. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. I am not detaining you. I am advising you that leaving now would be unwise. Her eyes flashed to me, measuring. I stood very still, because sometimes stillness is muscle. Nina's voice dropped, losing polish. You are making a spectacle. Wolfe's eyes were steady. No. You made it when you asked about a locker number you were not supposed to know. The bell rang downstairs. Fritz's footsteps moved with quiet certainty in the hall. Wolfe's mouth finally produced the thing it had been practicing, a small, contained smile that looked nothing like kindness. Now, Wolfe said, we will see who else comes to sit. Chapter 9. Confession. Written as Sleep Wolfe likes an audience the way most men like privacy. He claims it is a nuisance, then arranges it with the care of a man setting out silver. When the moment comes, he gathers people into his office as if they are facts that have finally agreed to sit still. That afternoon, the brownstone felt less like a home and more like a courtroom where the judge happens to keep orchids upstairs. Fritz had moved chairs with quiet precision. Wolfe's red leather chair faced his desk like a throne that resented the comparison. I stayed at my own desk, because Archie Goodwin belongs behind it when the knives come out, even if he is one of the knives. Kramer arrived first, heavy and annoyed, with Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins in tow, looking eager in a way that always made me want to protect him from adulthood. Kramer's eyes swept the room, noted Wolfe, noted me, noted the extra chairs, and scowled as if the furniture itself were insulting him. You said you had something, Kramer growled at Wolfe. I do, Wolfe replied. Sit, Inspector. Kramer sat because he could not help it. Wolfe's certainty has a way of pressing down on people like a palm on a shoulder. Next came Mara Trent with Dr. Halford. Mara looked smaller than the chair she took, hands folded too tightly in her lap, eyes moving as if every object in the room might suddenly speak her name. Halford sat near her, not touching, but close enough to make it clear she was not alone. Dillon. Cross arrived looking like he had decided to be angry in a useful direction. He sat stiffly, jaw set, eyes bright with resentment that had found a target. Graham Holt came last, and he came like a man who believed lateness was a privilege he paid for. He was broad, well-fed, dressed in expensive simplicity, with a face that had learned to look concerned without spending sincerity. He nodded to Kramer, as if they belonged to the same club, then looked at Wolfe with irritation wrapped in politeness. And then Nina Calder entered with Fritz, composed again, hands, polite eyes sharp. She did not look at Mara. She looked at Wolfe, because Wolfe was the threat, and Mara was merely the tool. Wolfe waited until Fritz had closed the door. The room settled. The air felt thick, like the house itself was listening. Wolfe folded his hands. You are here because Dr. Owen Rusk is dead, Miss Trent's notebook has vanished, and certain persons believe that sleep is a suitable place to conceal crime. Holt snorted softly. This is absurd. Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. Mr. Holt, your opinions are not required. Your presence is. Kramer rumbled. Wolfe, get to it. Wolfe inclined his head as if acknowledging a barking dog. Very. Well, Inspector, you have been told that Miss Trent repeatedly recorded the same dream. You have assumed naturally that this was either a psychiatric oddity or an irrelevance. It is neither. Mara swallowed. Her eyes went to Wolfe, clinging to his certainty like a railing. Wolfe continued. The notebook was not a dream journal. It was a courier device. The dream was not a dream. It was a planted script. Holt's face tightened. Nina's eyes stayed steady. Dylan said, low, I told him about the scripts. Wolfe nodded once, acknowledging Dylan's existence without, granting him control. Somnicare weaponized suggestion. They trained selected patients to memorize text and then to reproduce it with mechanical fidelity. The patient did not need to understand. She only needed to carry. Mara's fingers clenched. I didn't know. I know, Wolfe said, and the softness in his voice was so slight it almost sounded like a mistake. Ignorance was part of the design. Halford leaned forward. This is what I feared. Her compliance was exploited. Kramer scowled. You're saying they turned patients into messengers? Yes, Wolfe replied. Miss Trent's script contained data, a date, a time, a location, initials. Those are not symbols. They are instructions. But they were embedded in a story because stories are dismissed, Holt snapped. You have no proof. Wolfe's gaze went to Holt. You argue like a man protecting revenue. Holt's face reddened slightly. I am protecting. Patience from scandal, Nina's voice cut in, smooth as ever. Mr. Wolfe is misrepresenting therapeutic methods. Wolfe turned to her. Miss Calder, yesterday you asked me about a locker number before anyone mentioned such a number aloud. You revealed knowledge that could only come from the full script. Faint shift crossed Nina's face. Not fear. Annoyance at having slipped. Kramer leaned forward. Locker number. Wolfe nodded. Yes. We did not have it until Miss Calder volunteered the category. After she left yesterday, I instructed Mr. Goodwin to have Dr. Halford conduct a structured recall with Miss Trent. When prompted at the correct seam, she produced an additional segment, still in perfect rhythm. Mara's eyes widened, startled by the betrayal of her own memory. Halford's hand hovered near her elbow again. Wolfe said, Inspector, the additional segment included 3 knocks, a black stare, locker 13, Tuesday, a sequence and a destination method, a handoff. The room tightened. Even Holt's practiced calm paused. Kramer barked, Where? Wolfe lifted a hand. Patience, you will receive it. But first you will understand it. Dylan's voice was harsh. They did it. They put that garbage in her head like they did in mine. Wolfe nodded slightly. Yes, Somnicare's advertised service was sleep therapy. The profitable service was memory reinforcement packages. Private clients paid to have memories blunted, strengthened, or redirected. The clinic became a factory producing compliance, secrecy, and convenient forgetting. Holt's jaw hardened. That is a lie. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Mr. Cross overheard Dr. Rusk arguing with you about money and deliveries. You demanded production. Dr. Rusk resisted. Something changed. He was killed. Kramer swung his glare to Holt. You were in Rusk's office last week. Holt's mouth tightened. I have business conversations. That doesn't make me a murderer. No. Wolfe agreed. It makes you a motive, Holt snapped. Motive doesn't kill people. Wolfe's gaze slid to Nina. Correct. Motive requires means. Nina's expression remained composed, but her shoulders tightened slightly, as if her body had decided to brace without asking her. Wolfe continued. Dr. Rusk was found in a locked room, no struggle, with a faint puncture on the neck. This is not the mark of violence. It is the mark of efficiency. Kramer grunted. The medical examiner said needle. Yes, Wolfe said. A sedative microdose, likely paired with a cardiotoxic agent or an additive that produces respiratory collapse, administered quickly, without requiring restraint, leaving minimal blood. Holt scoffed. You're guessing. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I am reasoning. The murderer needed access to Dr. Rusk at close range, a method that would not produce a mess, the ability to leave the room locked, and sufficient technical competence to ensure a 12-minute lapse in security to cover approach and exit. Kramer's gaze snapped to Nina. You're a technician. Nina's voice stayed calm. I am a clinician support technician. That does not mean I murder people. Wolfe nodded. It means you have access to equipment capable of delivering drugs discreetly, hypodermic devices, injectable sedatives used in certain sleep protocols. It also means you are comfortable operating behind glass while a voice guides someone into obedience. Dylan flinched, anger flashing. Wolfe said, "The puncture could have been delivered by a concealed injector, perhaps even a ring device or a palm-held mechanism. One quick touch, a polite gesture, no struggle. Dr. Rusk feels nothing until he is already compromised." Mara's face went pale. Halford murmured something soothing, but it did not land. Kramer said, "And the locked room." Wolfe's gaze held. Dr. Rusk likely locked his own door, as was his habit. He trusted his system. The murderer did not need to force entry. She needed only to be invited or tolerated. After delivery of the drug, she could leave before symptoms peaked. The room remains locked. Dr. Rusk dies neatly at his desk. The scene appears natural unless one looks closely. Holt's eyes darted. "She. You keep saying she." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Because the person with means is Miss Calder." Nina's smile returned, thinner. "This is theater." Wolfe's expression sharpened. "It is logic. Now we address the missing notebook." Mara's hands clenched. Again. "It was in my bag," Wolfe nodded. "And it vanished without force. That requires skill in directed attention. It requires someone who can approach under the pretense of care, open a bag while the owner believes she is being helped, remove a small object, and close it without detection." Kramer growled. "Like a pickpocket." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Like a clinician accustomed to touching patients without triggering alarm." Nina's gaze chilled. "You are accusing me of theft, too." Wolfe's voice remained calm. "Yes, you stole the notebook because it contained the map. You stole certainty, not paper. You needed to erase the directions before they reached the due." "Police," Holt snapped. "If she stole anything, it was to protect patients." Dylan's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Protect, that's what they call it." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Holt, you had motive. You invested money. You demanded deliveries. You feared exposure. But you lacked means unless aided. Therefore, you relied on the person who ran the machine." Kramer's eyes were hard now, fixed on Nina. "You got anything to say?" Nina's hands remained polite, but her fingers pressed together, whitening slightly. "Mr. Wolfe is constructing a narrative. It is not evidence." Wolfe nodded once. "Then let us use your own curiosity as evidence. Yesterday you asked me about a locker number. You revealed that the script contained a locker. Today you sat down because you believed I possessed the decoded script. You came to control damage. That is behavior, Miss Calder. Behavior is evidence." The room went very quiet. Mara whispered, "So the dream was instructions." Wolfe's gaze softened a fraction. "Yes, a confession written as sleep. Not yours, Miss Trent. The confession of those who planted it. They hid their crime in your compliance." Halford's face was tight with anger now, controlled but real. "This is monstrous." Wolfe nodded. "Indeed, and Dr. Rusk's death was an escalation. He tried to quit or renegotiate. He guarded the cabinet key because it held proof or leverage. Someone killed him to keep the factory running. Someone stole the notebook to erase the map." Kramer stood abruptly, chair scraping. "All right, enough. Wolfe, you got the locker, you got the date, you got whatever else came out of her head. You tell me now, and we go get it." Wolfe looked at him, unhurried. "You will, Inspector, but not until you understand why going to fetch it may be dangerous. If the handoff is planned, interference will provoke the guilty, and provocation is useful only when controlled." Kramer's face reddened. "Wolfe," Wolfe's voice stayed level. "Sit down." Kramer did not sit, but he stopped moving. Wolfe turned his gaze to Nina Calder and Graham Holt. "In the next hour, one of you will attempt to contact a third party. A client, a partner, someone involved in the deliveries. You will attempt to warn them. That attempt will identify the final link." Nina's eyes flashed. "You have no right." Wolfe's mouth tightened into something close to a smile. "I have reason, and reason is sufficient." I watched Nina's face carefully. For the first time, her calm looked strained, not cracking but stretched. Holt looked furious, which in rich men often means frightened. Mara sat small. Dylan sat angry. Kramer stood like a storm held in a coat, and Wolfe sat behind his desk, gathering them like a dealer, gathering cards that thought they were free. The confession had been written as sleep. Now Wolfe meant to read it aloud in daylight. Chapter 10. The Riddle Street. Answer Wolfe finishes a riddle the way the city finishes a cigarette. Slowly, certainly, and with no concern for how ugly it looks when the last bit burns down to truth. By early evening the office was full again, but the mood had shifted. It was no longer curiosity and outrage, it was gravity, the kind that pulls every lie to the floor and makes it lie there, helpless, in plain view. Kramer had returned with more impatience and less doubt. Pearlie Stebbins hovered behind him, eager to be useful and nervous about the quality of the usefulness. Mara sat small, again hands folded, as if she could hold herself together by pressure alone. Dylan Cross sat rigid and angry, his fury directed now like a beam instead of scattered like sparks. Graham Holt arrived with the strained confidence of a man who had spent an hour calling attorneys and finding none of them capable of erasing time. Nina Calder came in with the same composed face she had worn before, but her calm had sharpened into something brittle. A polite blade is still a blade. Wolfe watched them take their seats. Then he looked at Fritz, who nodded and withdrew, closing the door with a soft final click. No one spoke for a moment. Wolfe permits silence the way a judge permits a witness to sweat. "Inspector," Wolfe said at last, "you have the results of your inquiries." Kramer grunted. "We got plenty. We got enough to make my desk heavier." Wolfe nodded. "Then we will lighten it." Kramer glared at Nina and Holt, then at Wolfe. "Go on." Wolfe's gaze moved around the room, touching each face as if testing whether it would hold up under weight. "This affair," Wolfe began, "was never about a dream. It was about a method. Somnacare Institute sold sleep to the public and sold obedience to private clients. The mechanism was suggestion, repeated in controlled sessions, delivered with professional softness until the mind accepted it as its own." Snorted. "That's melodrama." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "It is accounting." Dylan's mouth tightened in a grim approval. Mara's eyes flicked down, ashamed of nothing she had chosen and everything she had been made to carry. Wolfe continued. "Miss Trent's dream journal was a courier. The script contained operational information disguised as nonsense. The address on West 43rd Street led investigators to a storage facility operated through Meridian Records. Locker 13 contained client files, delivery schedules, payment, records and recordings linking Somnacare's memory reinforcement operation to Graham Holt and Nina Calder. A date, a time, a location, a sequence, a locker number, an identifier. She did not need to understand. She only needed to reproduce it perfectly. Mara whispered, "I didn't know." "I know," Wolfe said, and for Wolfe that was as close as sympathy gets. He turned slightly toward Nina Calder. "Miss Calder, you revealed yourself yesterday by asking about the drop details before anyone stated them aloud. You asked about a locker number. That knowledge was not available from rumor. It was available only to someone who had access to the full script." Nina's face remained composed. "You are repeating your speculation." Wolfe nodded once. "Then let us proceed to facts." He lifted a hand toward Kramer. "Inspector, the security logs." Kramer's mouth twisted. "Somnacare's cameras went out for 12 minutes last night. We pulled the back end. Didn't take long once we had a warrant and a technician who wasn't paid to forget." Nina's eyes flickered, just once. Kramer went on, voice rough with satisfaction. "That glitch lines up with a console login. Nina Calder's credentials. Logged in at 8:45, logged out at 8:59, 12 minutes, same 12 minutes we lost." Dylan let out a short breath through his nose, like a laugh that had no humor left. Nina's voice stayed calm, but it thinned. My login could have been used by someone else. Wolfe's eyes were steady. An old defense. It rarely succeeds when the accused is the custodian of procedure. He turned to Holt. Mr. Holt, you demanded deliveries. You argued with Dr. Rusk about money and production. You funded the side operation. You profited. Holt's jaw bulged. That doesn't make me a killer. No, Wolfe agreed. It makes you a man who would accept killing as a cost if someone else handled the mess. Holt started to speak, but Wolfe raised a hand, and the gesture stopped him like a rope. Now, Wolfe said, Dr. Rusk. The room felt colder. Even Mara's breathing sounded loud. Dr. Rusk attempted to quit, Wolfe said, or renegotiate. He had begun to understand the legal and moral exposure of Somnicare's packages. He guarded a locked cabinet, key on his chain, because it contained recordings, session scripts, client contracts, payment ledgers, and backup copies of the implanted instruction programs, scripts, client agreements, delivery schedules, perhaps recordings. He threatened to expose the side operation or to use it as leverage. Either way, he became inconvenient. Nina's eyes hardened. You are inventing motive. Wolfe's mouth tightened. No, I am identifying it. He looked at Kramer again. Inspector, the cabinet key. Kramer grunted. Missing from Rusk's chain. We searched the office top to bottom. No key. No sign it fell. It was taken. Wolfe nodded. And taken by the one person who understood its value and had clean access. He let that hang a moment, then said, Miss Calder had continuous authorized access to Dr. Rusk's office under the pretense of technical support. She also had access to Miss Trent's bag under the pretense of patient care. A technician can approach a frightened woman, touch her shoulder, adjust a strap, check vitals, and the patient will accept the intrusion as help. That is how the notebook vanished without force. A gentle hand assisted by guided attention. Mara's lips parted. Someone touched my bag. Wolfe's gaze softened a fraction. Yes, without your awareness. That is not your failure, it is their method. Nina's composure tightened. This is nonsense. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Then explain your premature interest in the date and locker. Explain your console login aligning precisely with the missing footage. Explain how Dr. Rusk died with a needle puncture and no struggle. He did not wait. Wolfe never waits when the conclusion is ready. The murder method, Wolfe said, was the clinic's own tool, a microdose delivered by a concealed injector, a hypodermic ring or a palm device requiring only a light touch at the neck. The puncture was faint, the blood minimal, the effect rapid enough to produce collapse at the desk. No struggle was necessary because the delivery was subtle and the victim likely did not comprehend what had occurred until comprehension no longer mattered. Kramer's voice cut in, harsh. Me confirmed drug traces, sedative and something that hit the heart hard, fast. Nina's jaw tightened. That was the first visible break, not in her calm, but in her control over it. Wolfe's voice remained steady. Dr. Rusk was killed in his own office after Miss Calder disabled the cameras. She used the quiet competence of her position, the same competence that guided clients behind glass. She delivered death the way she delivered suggestion, smoothly. Professionally? Dylan's hands clenched. They did that to people. Wolfe nodded slightly. Yes. The murder was not the first crime. It was merely the loudest one. Holt's face flushed. You can't prove she killed him. Wolfe's eyes slid to Holt. I can prove she is the only person with both means and opportunity who also revealed knowledge of the script before it was disclosed. That is sufficient for a police action. Proof beyond doubt will be supplied by the physical evidence you have already begun collecting. He turned toward Nina Calder again. Miss Calder, you protected the machinery because you ran it. Mr. Holt funded it. Dr. Rusk once supervised it. But you operated it. You believed you were essential. You believed the factory could not function without your hands and your voice. Nina's smile tried to return. It failed. "Rusk should have destroyed the files when I told him to," she said. The room went silent. A second later, she realized what she had admitted. Her eyes flashed. "You don't understand what you're destroying." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I understand precisely. I am destroying a mechanism that teaches people not to ask questions when awake." Mara made a small sound, as if something inside her had loosened. Kramer stood, chair scraping. "All right. That's enough. Calder, you're coming with me. Holt, you too." "We'll let the lawyers dance later," Holt sputtered. "This is outrageous," Kramer barked. "Save it for the judge." Nina rose slowly. Her hands were still polite, but her eyes had turned flat. As Pearlie moved toward her, Nina's gaze flicked, once to Mara. Not pity. Calculation. Mara shrank a little in her chair, then steadied, watching Wolfe as if his certainty could hold the room together. Wolfe spoke once more, not to Nina, not to Holt, but to Kramer. "Inspector, ensure that Miss Trent receives support. She is a victim. Do not permit your office to treat her as a curiosity," Kramer grunted. "I got it." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, demanding more than a grunt. Kramer added, more grudgingly, "We'll make sure she gets help, and that clinic gets shut down." "Good," Wolfe said. Halford exhaled, a long breath that seemed to carry weeks with it. Dylan Cross stared at the floor, jaw still set, but his shoulders had loosened slightly, like a man who has finally heard someone say the thing out loud. Kramer and Pearlie escorted Nina Calder and Graham Holt out. The door closed. The brownstone felt as if it had released a held breath. For a moment there was only the quiet hum of the house, the distant city noise filtered through thick walls, and the steady presence of Wolfe behind his desk. Mara's voice was small. "Will it stop?" Wolfe looked at her, and this time the softness in his expression was clearer. "It will stop because it has been exposed. Methods like this thrive in secrecy. They wither in light." She nodded, eyes wet but steady. "Thank you." Wolfe made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. "You will thank Dr. Halford as well. He brought the matter to me instead of ignoring it. That is rare." Halford's mouth tightened, and he looked both relieved and ashamed. "I should have seen it sooner." Wolfe's gaze was firm. "See it now. That is the important part." When Mara and Halford left, and Dylan left with a stiff nod that was as close as he could come to gratitude, the house returned to its normal proportions. Fritz appeared, as if summoned by the absence of chaos, and asked Wolfe if he would dine. Wolfe finally looked tired. "Yes, Fritz, immediately." Fritz withdrew with the quiet dignity of a man whose universe is held together by meals. I sat at my desk, staring at nothing. Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin." "Yeah," I replied. "You are troubled," Wolfe said. "I'm fine," I lied. Wolfe snorted softly. "You are not fine. The case offended you. That is natural. It should." I looked at him. "They used sleep." Wolfe's eyes were steady. "Yes. That's the part I can't get over," I said. "You can guard your wallet, you can guard your door, you can guard your mouth, but sleep. Sleep is supposed to be where the world can't reach you." Wolfe's voice was low. "Nothing is supposed to be anything. People impose their will wherever they find access." I nodded slowly, not liking the truth of it. As Fritz's footsteps moved upstairs, as the familiar smells of cooking began to seep into the hall, I felt my mind drift for a second, the way it does when you are tired and relieved and not paying attention. And then I heard it. Not in the room, not from Wolfe, not from the street. For the first time since the case began, the phrase no longer sounded like a command. It sounded like evidence, just once. It was not a voice, it was a line. A clean, neat line that slid into place with sickening ease. I sat up straighter, as if posture could shove the thought out. Wolfe watched me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Forced a grin because it was either grin or shiver. You know what I hate. What? Wolfe said. How easy it is to remember, I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened, and for once he did not offer a retort. He simply looked past me toward the window, toward New York, where millions of people would go to bed that night believing their dreams belonged to them. Downstairs, the doorbell did not ring. No new client arrived. No new riddle knocked. The case was finished. The police had taken the living. Wolfe kept the truth. I kept the uneasy feeling that sleep was no longer innocent, and outside the city went on, slow and certain and ugly, as if it had never promised anyone anything at all.